Hello and welcome to a special gray sweatshirt and sweatpants edition of the Best Swordsman series, because today we are honoring the Primarch of the 10th Legion, the one and only Ferrus Manus, particularly the August Warmaster deck as played by VSHKPOP. Maybe I'm pronouncing that wrong, who's to say? But yes, as you know, VSHKPOP was August Warmaster. He piloted Ferrus Manus for virtually 100% of his games, switching up the deck as he went. I'm going to go over the complete deck tech, going over both of the major decks that he used, give or take some variations. We won't be able to get into 100% of the variations because he didn't track all of them. But I've got the two basic bodies of the deck that he used over the season, and I'll go over why he made the changes that he did, how the deck works, and then I've actually got I feel like I've got almost an hour of Ferrus Manus matches. I'm not going to play them all in this episode, but I'll go through an episode of commentary after we do the deck tech, and then maybe over the course of the week I'll just release some of the other ones without full commentary. I don't know if I'll do commentary for all of them, but you'll see what you get. We'll see what you get. If you're good, maybe you'll get more commentary, or maybe you don't want commentary. If you're good, you'll get no commentary. We'll see. We'll see what you get. Talking like I've had my head cut off. Behind me, you'll see that's a horse. Right there. Right over there. That's no ordinary horse. That horse has 6 breasts. Welcome to the warp.
I am the best. I am the best swordsman. I am the best swordsman.
Ladies and gentlemen, the headless, horse-faced Primarch of the 10th Legion himself, Ferrus Manus. He's historically been considered a little bit weak, both because of low initiative and an expensive ability for an only really modest buff. And of course it becomes so expensive because it is very hard to stick a troop and have them survive long enough to really take advantage of said buff. So for those reasons, Ferrus is typically overlooked. Here we have the Reckoning card that every Primarch will get, basically a Reckoning or Whisper card, unless you're really special like Alfarius with his secret identity or Conrad Kurz with his madness. Ferrus reduces the cost every time a friendly troop dies. You don't need to try that hard to trigger this Reckoning in competitive play, as we'll see with the deck list. But this is something that you'll need to be aware of and build around if you wish. If you can play your Reckoning card, this is who you get. You will usually kill your opponent once you transform as Ferrus. That +1 strength is cumulative. So he'll get +1 strength for transforming, and every turn he will add 1 strength. And this can get to quite frightening levels. You don't want to mess with the Gorgon. He's serious. It's a shame that this guy died. Alright, and without further ado, this is the Take All Comers deck. This is the deck that VSHKPOP used for about the first half of the season, give or take, and was pretty capable of handling everybody. This was used for a diverse meta, so this was fine against Night Lords, Custodes, Alpha Legion, Bolvi. This is the proper all-comers deck. And this is basically a very, very straightforward mid-range deck. You're going to want to try and play a troop, buff it if you can, but kind of fight over the board and then follow up with late game bigger bodies, and if possible, and as VSHKPOP says, it's actually very likely, you want to be able to pull off your Reckoning come the end of the game. It's almost a late game threat after your smaller troops have been killed off. And the cool feature about the deck is that it's actually about 2/3 Iron Hands, and this is coming from a Legion card pool that, as VSHKPOP and I actually discussed together, is considered pretty weak. There's no flank, there's no fast, the troops are slow, no warlord has high initiative, and outside of a couple of really strong cards, like Win of the Week for example, the tactics are generally, they're okay. Of course, introduction of new neutrals like Vorax and Vulturax opens up some cool new synergies, and we'll get to use the classics, who are very good for buffing. So let's take a look at some of those. If you've ever had to face these guys, they are annoying as all hell, and if you've ever got to play them, nothing feels better than randomly hitting exactly what you need. For 2 energy, they do offer a lot of value. They can be buffed to help you manage the early game very easily, and that 3 toughness is quite survivable. This is one of the best 2-drops in the game. In fact, very mandatory Iron Hands cards and one of the top troops you can get your hands on. The Banus squad has always been considered among the playable Iron Hands troops, but with the addition of strong new neutral vehicles like Vorax and Vulturax, Banus has essentially received an indirect buff. And so to be clear, if you're not already familiar with the Iron Hands pool, this will draw any vehicle from your deck at random. So it doesn't matter whether it's an Iron Hands vehicle or not, it's even better that it's any vehicle. This will help pull a Vorax or Vulturax into your hand and just help you have it when you need it. One of the best hard removal in the game. It's cheap, it allows you to catch up on tempo, and it's very well balanced with a very minor downside, honestly, one that doesn't often come into effect. Unlike World Eater's Sedition's Gate, you don't need a troop in play to be able to play Winnow the Weak. So if your enemy has 1 troop on board, you play Winnow, you've removed it, done. One and done. Just an excellent card. Also doubles as anti-stealth in its own way. Probably at least one of these would help constitute the backbone of this Ferrus deck that we're showcasing today. Deus Ex hasn't always been very popular, especially outside of like Gabriel Santar builds, but with Ferrus you're basically able to heal your whole line, or even if you're just healing yourself, 5 health, it can help you kind of get your head above water. So try and get your hands on at least one of these as well. This is the true backbone deal breaker card of the deck. This is the real power card. It's not a troop, it's actually a very excellent tactic. I'm hard pressed to find a reason why not to put this in every Iron Hands deck. I'd basically consider it a mandatory card at this point. If you're playing Servo Arm, play it on curve when you have it. Play it as soon as you're able to play it. The dividends will return, if that makes sense. I'm not a financial wizard guy, what do I know? And a tasty little surprise that was oh so pleasantly buffed very, very recently. The hammer is now one of the best board sweepers in the game, especially with the way the deck curves out. You have a very good chance of drawing a high cost card and pretty much just clearing everything. Sorry, it's not as good as the harrowing. What can you do? But it's a cantrip that is basically going to clear board. Enjoy it. And enjoy these words of wisdom from our very own August Warmaster. They are going to resound to you very clearly as we talk about the deck that brought him from the mid-season all the way through to the end game. At a higher points tier, the payout per win is very low. The casualty to your points is very high. You basically have to win about 3 games to make up for 1 loss. That's just to get you back to where you started. So at this stage, VSHKPOP, in a sea of Magnuses, essentially, just tried to turtle up the deck. The main change to this deck is the introduction of neutral healing like Pi Alphas and Manifest Destiny, which on top of the servo arm, just give it another burst of longevity pretty much. The goal essentially was to try and improve the win rate against Magnus specifically by turtling as much as he could. The main recommendation now is maybe to play 2 McCormick's Reapers, which are quite strong against Magnus's unending horde of Ancto, but you've got room to do stuff like play Sistar, Equitrez, Urtzi. That's personal preference, but there's room for the deck to play that. And this guy needs no introduction. This guy became super popular the day Alpha Legion hit the ladder. This guy is not mandatory necessarily in competitive play, but he's a very, very useful card. He's healing that's accessible to everybody. The anti-stun is awesome, of course, in certain metas, but being able to heal 3 and present a 2 health body, that's potentially a 5 health difference you're able to create with the enemy warlord. Not to be overlooked if you're finding that people are running away with games and you're lacking on life. Likewise, a little bit of a different card than Pi Alpha. Manifest Destiny is not for every deck. It's not a great fit in some aggro decks, but sadly it's usually used to make a hardy warlord even hardier. Usually the fragile warlords don't have time and lose too much tempo to play it, but experiment as you will, and you might find some cool uses for it in your favorite warlord. Oh, Ferrus, if only you were using Manifest Destiny when this happened. Gonna miss you, bud. You shouldn't have said that. Magnus did everything wrong. And speak of the devil, and he will appear. This is a pretty happy starting hand. We've got early stall. If Urlock squad dies, fine. We've got abandoned supplies to help us accelerate. And we have a servo arm that we're going to play on curve, so we're happy as clams. Now we don't need the Urlock squad in play right now, so we're not going to play them. And note well that Ferrus is never going face. Like most troop supporting warlords, his strength is buffing his side of the board. It's not making trades with the enemy warlord's health. You don't want to be doing that. And if we can force some pressure from the enemy Magnus to wipe him out, great, but if he wants to kill him, fine. Fine by us. Yeah, there's no rush to play cards. Give him a buff, give him a hard time. Shame that it costs Magnus no card advantage to do that, but so it goes. Works out for us. Better that our little buddy takes it than we do. We haven't taken any damage yet, so playing the servo arm on curve is obviously a bit of an exception to this rule, since we've got the opportunity to make a 4-5 threat instead. If we had been pressured, or if we had a weaker early game, if we took the Ankto to the face, I'd say, and VSHKPOP would probably agree with me, that it would be right to just get the servo arm online. And again, our main priority is, let's stop the mortar carrier. Because those damn mortar carriers are just freaking nightmares. Gotta be the best common in the game. Ferrus's ability is expensive, so as the game gets later, we will have more opportunities to use it. We'll basically be able to play a troop and buff it. Like so. Every body that comes out of our hand has some added value to it. And you have to expect that that they're just going to get killed anyways, and be fine with that. It's our reckoning that's going to give us kickbacks for all the dead bodies by the end of the game. If only Ferrus could get a kickback for his dead body, am I right? Oh god, I'm imperfect scum. And if you take note of the amount of cards we've got in our hand compared to Magnus, we're making some pretty good trades so far. We're doing a good grind. And with the servo arm online, his average damage output per turn is going to start to decrease and probably just peter out at a long, maybe 2 on some turns. So he'll get nowhere even going face. We're not super concerned about Magnus's Whispers triggering, because by then we should hopefully have our Reckoning off, and Reckoning Ferrus will kill Shard of Magnus. Maybe that'll happen. Who knows? Our troops are so big and can just get buffed so much bigger that by Ferrus over time that the enemy can't really afford to leave them alone unless they're really able to put a lot of heat on us. Ferrus doesn't excel too well during metas that are heavy on aggro. Even 30 health warlords, whoever they are, can pretty much beat the ever-living crap out of Ferrus within about 5 or 6 turns, and the jig is up before the guy has a chance to even have enough energy to boost his own troops. Slower metas, like as brutal as Magnus is, and as much as VSHKPOP says there's some decks that kill you by turn 8, that's still a little later than the aggro meta. And yeah, Magnus is a hard matchup, but things have slowed down a bit, which if you can give it the right kind of defensive support and find ways to put some pressure out, you can play a slower deck now. Even with Canis in the meta, like, yeah, and Canis is a beast, and let's not get started on it, but even with Canis on the meta, you can have some fun with decks like this. And if you've watched the channel, you've seen Ingathel showcased a couple weeks back, where 40 health and being a pillar of support for her troops, yeah, she can do okay. Oh boy, this is just getting nasty for enemy Magnus. Of course, with that much psychic energy, yeah, that's bound to happen. But now we're taking all the usual Thousand Sun shenanigans, but we're able to just take it on the chin, keep moving. The advantage is with us now, because he's now burned through Book of Magnus. He doesn't have any more outs in that respect after this. He might have some more psychic powers, of course, but they're not getting replayed now. And we've got tons of healing, so we have time to draw pressure. And this little singleton Eutropius, that's personal preference. It's not an essential card to the deck. If you wanted to play Sistar or Equitrez instead, that's all you. You got that. But we're at the point now where it's a threat if he's left alone. If he dies, fine. I also highly advise, if you do want to be very serious about the game and you don't have great memorization skills, have a pen and paper. It's good to keep track of enemy warlords, certainly Primarchs, Reckonings, and Whisper. If you want to improve your win rate against Magnus, keep track of his Whisper triggers. Keep track of how much damage you've done to him, because it will change the way you play once you know that he's down to a 12 cost Whispers. You can only afford to hit him twice before he triggers. So yeah, pen and paper can really help you. If you're playing Leman Russ, pen and paper can help you max out damage. But now we're in a pretty dominating spot right now. We're healing a couple health points a turn from our servo arm and our +1 healing from the fact that we've triggered our Reckoning. We've got Deus Ex in hand, and in a couple turns we're going to be pretty beastly unless he can manage to kill us, which is why he's rapid firing out that Goldstones now, because he knows it's just mano-y mano. I love this card in Magnus. Orbital Bombardment's great. Pretty good Custodes finisher if you're playing a fun deck like Shapura, who's sadly not too competitive, but it's neither here nor there. Yeah, and of course we've burned through 10 troops, but that's fine. Where we're going, we don't need troops. Likewise, there's no need for pressure. Let's just get ahead of the game with some extra health, and let's keep smashing. Good lines.
Only one of us will walk away from this.
VSHKPOP is the strong silent type. He doesn't use chat. He doesn't use the chat options, but I highly encourage it, especially if you're playing a Primarch. They have some pretty epic lines. And he's trying here, but watch our health total change going into our turn. $11, $13. Oh, good for me, I can count. Wow. Yeah. 15 health, especially that we know he's already played Orbital Bombardment. Very unlikely he's playing 2. We're in a pretty safe and happy spot right now. And we'll save our Goldstones for lethal. He's throwing the whole kitchen sink at us. Close.
I was expecting you.
Yep. We're just we're gonna walk that off. So that's it. We're gonna play threats. Buff him if we can. Create some presence on the board, and then capitalize it if those threats have been answered. But what we've all been waiting for. Never mind, Magnus.
There is only one fate for traitors.
For the briefest second, Fulgrim had been sure that Ferrus would pause to muster with the Raven Guard and Salamanders, but after his daring challenge atop the rock, there would be no restraining his brother. Around him, the last of the Phoenix Guard awaited the blunt wedge of the Iron Hands, their golden halberds held low and aimed towards their foes. Marius and his wailing sonic weapons howled in anticipation of the combat, and Julius, almost unrecognizable with his skin burnt from his bones, ran a blistered tongue around the lipless ruin of his mouth. Ferrus Manus and his Morlocks charged through the shattered ruins of the defenses, his black armor and their burnished plates scarred and stained with the blood of enemies. Fulgrim's fixed smile faltered as he truly appreciated the depths of hatred his brother held for him, and wondered again how they had come to this point, knowing that any chance for brotherhood was lost. Only in death could this end. The retreat of the Warmaster's forces appeared ragged and faltering, exactly as Horus had planned it. Warriors streamed back from the front lines of battle in determined groups, their spirits apparently broken, but gathering in knots of resistance behind shelled ruins and fire-blackened craters. The Iron Hands pushed through the defenses, the bulky Terminators unstoppable in their relentless advance. Lightning crackled from the claws of their gauntlets and their red eyes shone with anger. The Phoenix Guard braced themselves to meet the charge, fully aware of the power of such mighty suits of armor. Marius released a howl of ecstatic joy, and his bizarre weapon amplified it into a screeching wail of deadly harmonics that ripped through the ground in a roaring sonic wave to explode among the first ranks of the Morlocks. The giant warriors were torn apart in a clashing shriek of oral power as the apocalyptic noise made play of their armor and butter of their flesh. The Emperor's children screamed in pleasure at the sound, their enhanced senses and augmented brain paths rendering the discordant sounds into the most vivid sensations imaginable. "When they come," shouted Fulgrim, "leave Ferrus Manus to me." The Phoenix Guard answered with a terrible war cry and leapt to meet the Morlocks in a searing clash of blades. Electric fire leapt from the golden edges of the halberds and claws of the warriors, and a storm of light and sound flared from each life and death struggle. The battle engulfed the Primarch of the Emperor's children, but he stood above it, awaiting the dark-armored giant who strode inviolate through the lightning-shot carnage as brothers hacked at one another in hatred. Fulgrim nodded in greeting as Ferrus reached towards the sword belted at his waist, and he smiled as he recognized Fireblade's hilt. "You remade my sword," said Fulgrim, his voice cutting through the atrocious din of fighting. Though the ferocious battle between the Morlocks and the Phoenix Guard surrounded them, neither Primarch's Praetorians dared approach them, as though aware that to transgress this fateful confrontation would be a heinous crime. "Only to see you dead by a weapon forged by my own hand," spat Ferrus. In response, Fulgrim sheathed his silver sword and reached behind him to unlimber the great warhammer held at his back. "Then I shall do likewise." The great weight of Forgebreaker, the weapon his own skill and energies had crafted beneath the peaks of Mount Narodnia, felt good in his hands as he descended the rock to face his erstwhile brother. "It is fitting we face one another with the weapons we forged long ago," said Fulgrim. "I have long waited for this moment, Fulgrim," replied Ferrus. "Ever since you came to me with betrayal in your heart. For months I have dreamt of this reckoning. Only one of us will walk away from this, you know that." "I know that," agreed Fulgrim. "You betrayed the Emperor, and you betrayed me," said Ferrus, and Fulgrim was surprised to hear genuine emotion in his brother's voice. "I came to you because of our friendship, not despite it," answered Fulgrim. "The universe is changing, the old order upset, and a new dawn approaching. I offered you the chance to be part of the new order, but you threw it back at me." "You sought to make me a traitor," snarled Ferrus. "Horus is mad. Look at all this death. How can this be right? You will hang from traitor's gibbet for this sedition, for I am the Emperor's loyal servant, and through me his will and vengeance will be done. The Emperor is a spent force, snapped Fulgrim. Even now he whittles away on some trivia in the dungeons of Terra while his realm is in flames. Are those the actions of a being fit to rule the galaxy? Do not think you can win me to your cause, Fulgrim. You failed once, and you will not get a second chance. Fulgrim shook his head. I am not offering you a second chance, Ferrus. It is already too late for you and your warriors. Ferrus laughed at him, but he could sense the despair in it. Are you mad, Fulgrim? It's over. You and the Warmaster are defeated. Your forces are routed, and the power of another 4 legions will soon crush your attempt at rebellion utterly. Fulgrim was unable to keep the sensation seething in his head contained any longer, and he shook his head as he savored his next words. My brother, how naive you are. Do you really think Horus would be foolish enough to trap himself like this? Look to the north, and you will see that it is you who are undone. Fulgrim laughed at the stunned look on Ferrus's face as the forces of his allies opened fire upon the Salamanders and Raven Guard. Hundreds died in the fury of the first moments, hundreds more in the seconds following, as volley after volley of bolter fire and missiles scythed through their unsuspecting ranks. Explosions flashed to life in their midst, vaporizing warriors and tearing through tanks as the force of 4 legions ripped a beating heart from the first wave of loyalists. Ferrus Manus watched in mute horror as he saw a storm of fire engulf Corax, and a titanic explosion mushroom skyward from where Vulcan stood in astonished outrage at what was happening. Even as terrifying carnage was being wreaked upon the loyalists below, the retreating forces of the Warmaster turned and brought their weapons to bear on the enemy warriors within their midst. Hundreds of World Eaters, sons of Horus, and the Death Guard fell upon the veteran companies of the Iron Hands, and though the warriors of the 10th Legion continued to fight gallantly, they were hopelessly outnumbered and would soon be hacked to pieces. Only dismal defeat and death awaits you, Ferrus, said Fulgrim. Horus has commanded your death, but for the sake of our past friendship, I shall plead your case to him if you throw down your arms. You have to surrender, Ferrus. There is no escape. Ferrus Manus tore his eyes from the slaughter of the loyalist forces, his teeth bared with the volcanic fury of his home world. Maybe not, traitor, but only dishonor holds any terror for me, spat Ferrus. The Emperor's loyal warriors will not surrender to you, not now, not ever. You will have to kill every last one of us. So be it, said Fulgrim, launching himself towards Ferrus Manus, swinging his mighty warhammer. The Primarch's weapons, forged in brotherhood, but wielded in vengeance, met in a blazing plume of energy, and the battlefield was illuminated for hundreds of meters by their ferocious energies. The true Primarchs traded blows with their monstrously powerful weapons, the strength to defeat armies and topple mountains unleashed as they fought like gods forced to end their dispute in the realm of mortals. Ferrus Manus wielded his flaming blade in fiery slashes, his every blow defeated by the ebony-hafted hammer he had borne in countless campaigns. Fulgrim swung his hammer in great looping arcs, its heavy head powerful enough to crush the armor of a titan to paste. Both warriors fought with the hatred only brothers divided can muster, their armor dented, torn, and blackened by the fury of their conflict. To fight an opponent of such magnificence was a privilege, and Fulgrim savored every clash of hammer and sword, every fiery line cut across his flesh, as every grunt of pain torn from his brother's mouth as Forgebreaker lanced his armor. They circled in the midst of cries of pain and roaring savage glee, the Morlocks of Ferrus Manus slain but for our last few desperate heroes. Ferrus cut the shoulder guard from Fulgrim's armor and spun inside his guard to deliver a lethal thrust towards his groin. Fulgrim stepped to meet the blow, batting aside the tip of the fiery sword with the haft of Forgebreaker and hammering the warhammer's head towards Ferrus's skull. The Primarch of the Iron Hands took the blow, dropping to one knee and lashing out with his blade as blood streamed from the terrible wound at his temple. The sword's fiery tip cut across Fulgrim's stomach, opening his armor and tearing through flesh. The pain was indescribable, and Fulgrim fell back, dropping his hammer as his hand sought to stem the blood pouring from his body. Both Primarchs faced each other on their knees through a haze of pain and blood, and Fulgrim once again felt an ache of sadness well within him. The pain of his wounds and the sight of his brother's broken skull coated in blood tore a window into his mind. The sensation was like a powerful gust of fresh mountain air, clearing away the fog that had wrapped him in a suffocating embrace for so long that he no longer noticed it until it was gone. "My brother," he whispered. "My friend." "You have long since lost the right to call me friend," snarled Ferrus, pushing himself to his feet and staggering towards Fulgrim with Fireblade raised to smite him. Fulgrim cried out, and his hand leapt unbidden to his waist as the flaming blade carved a burning path towards his neck. Silver steel flashed as he drew the sword he had taken from the lair temple and blocked the descending weapon. Ferrus's sword hissed and spat as it bit into the silver blade, the Primarch of the Iron Hands' strength forcing the blazing metal, centimeter by centimeter, towards Fulgrim's face. "No," cried Fulgrim, "this is not right." The amethyst stone at the hilt of Fulgrim's sword pulsed with an evil light, bathing Ferrus Manus' face in a leering purple glare. Energy streamed from the blade and musky smoke billowed around them, deadening sounds and obscuring sight. Fulgrim felt a monstrous presence swell around him, its power and nameless essence more intoxicating and dreadful than anything he could ever have imagined. "Finish him! Kill him!" the voice screamed, and to Fulgrim it seemed as though it echoed across time and space as well as within his skull. He staggered with the blunt force of its imperative, lurching as though his limbs were not his to control. "He must die, otherwise he will kill you." In an instant that stretched for an eternity, he saw what he had become and what monstrous betrayal he had allowed himself to be party to. He knew in that eternal moment that he had made a terrible mistake in drawing the sword from the lair temple, and he fought to release the damnable blade that had brought him so low.
Well, that's another slash on my face. Thanks for tuning into the Best Swordsman series. Catch you on the ladder.